Welcome back to another episode of NFL News on the Boomer Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today doing a little bit of a season preview as we get ready to go into the season. Thursday, I keep thinking it's tomorrow. It's not, but Thursday the season will kick off, and I think I speak for everybody or all the football fans say that we are beyond excited. It's that time of the year, time to get back. A couple things I will say though, that I guess kind of damper my excitement, enthusiasm a little bit. Number one, Travis Kelce getting injured, man, today or yesterday. That's crazy. I just drafted him yesterday, number one overall in my fantasy league. And one of my friends drafted him, I think, number two. So, yeah, him getting hurt, obviously, that's going to hurt a lot of fantasy owners. And I ain't played fantasy in years, so it's my first time diving back into it with my chapter. So I just figured, why not? And I ended up getting number one pick, and I just thought Kelce was a solid choice because I think people are overinflating what Justin Jefferson is going to do this year. And I might be wrong, but I just think there's more question marks without Dalvin Cook than people are going to give it credit for. So there's that. Then the second thing I'll say is maybe it's because I went to like a live joint practice or whatever, and I'm starting to see it. But um, it is really becoming. I wouldn't say concerning because the NFL won't care, but it's becoming interesting that the first handful of weeks are tune-up games for the most part for the NFL. Now, college, they do the same thing usually. A lot of teams will have kind of tune-up games early on in the season because they don't have scheduled games prior to the season. The NFL does, and the NFL teams just don't use them. They are mostly just using it for, bubble players on the roster, backups, all that. And they don't really use it as a time to tune up their players. And I used to be on the bandwagon of, yeah, joint practices, great idea. But like I said, after seeing one, I don't know. Not that it's bad, but I definitely don't feel that it's enough to really get your team where you want to get to. It definitely gets a little spark of competition, but I don't think it really prepares a team the way you want it to prepare for those live bullets. It's just not. It is almost like a football camp. If you ever been to one or took a kid to one, it was almost like that where you're doing 7-on-7s, you're doing linemen 1-on-1s, you're doing like all these different things that is, yeah, kind of practicey, a little bit of competition, but it's not live bullets. So these first few weeks, I expect to see some sloppy football play. Now, there's a debate goes back and forth. They say the defenses are better early on than the offenses. I think it's different for each team, but I will say that those first few weeks, they have to become tune-up games because the preseason, you already lost the game, and then people aren't really using it, and so that's a bit unfortunate. I think the NFL would do better. Not even necessarily preseason games, but their practices are so that is worse. And we've heard so many players and people talk about that. It's way worse. They don't practice as much. You hear a lot of players talk about time on task, which is a teaching term. And really actually goes back to the factory days, but that's a whole nother stuff. So you got time on task. You got a lot of players that are focusing on that. They don't get a lot of time on task like they used to when they had longer practices, double practices, padded practices. Now everything's so reduced because that's what the players negotiated instead of negotiating, better contracts and no tags, but they negotiated less practice and they play like they have less practice. So that is kind of one of the unfortunate things, but obviously the season starting, we're going to be excited. So anyway, I rambled on that for longer than I wanted to. So I'm going to start it off with the divisions. Let me talk about who I got as division winners in terms of me making my bets. I mean, you pick all 8 divisions, it's a big bet, so you only got to put $1 on to make some big money. So it's not like I'm like putting the whole house on this, but just throwing it out there for the beginning of the year. This is the team. These are the teams that I bet on. So for the AFC North, I have the Bengals coming out. I know a lot of people like the Ravens. I'm not really concerned about Joe Burrow until I see that I need to be. I think even if he misses week 1, he'll be back, and it's the Bengals. They'll roll. AFC East is tough, but I have the Bills. Now, the thing about this, and one of the things I want to point out to fans, because we got to be better fans here. Looking at the schedule is such an underrated thing. Why, I don't know. I'm talking about from media to casual fans, everybody. Looking at the schedule is one of those things that a lot of people don't talk about. And so I remember when my Bears, when they had their big season, and we were number 2 or something like that seed in the NFC, whatever, Matt Nagy's first year. I said before that season that we had X amount of wins just based off the schedule. And then, obviously got a lot of pushback and blah, blah, blah. You're a hater. Somehow I'm a hater on my own team. And lo and behold, the years after that, the results were different. And people, obviously there's a lot of different parts to that. But I'm like, one of the biggest parts is the schedule. We had a much tougher schedule after that year. And so people dismiss that or don't think about it enough. And I think that's an important part. So I say that to say I picked the Bills, but the Jets actually have the easiest schedule out of the 3 contenders in this division. I know there's a lot being talked about the first 4 games of the Jets because the Jets is something to talk about. So that's when they bring the schedule up, when they feel that there's a story to talk about. But if you really look at the rest of the schedule, the Jets at the end of the season have the way easier schedule compared to the Dolphins and the Bills. But the Jets just have a lot of question marks. Obviously, we got to see how it all comes together. And the offensive line's a question mark. So I'm still rolling with the Bills on that one. The AFC South, I'm actually taking the Titans. So this, again, is about that schedule. So the easiest thing you can do, and they tell you this like in the middle of the season, they'll tell you who you're facing. So, for example, the NFC East. The NFC East is facing the NFC West and the AFC East. So that means that the Cowboys, the Eagles, they have to see the Bills, they have to see the Dolphins, they have to see the Jets. And they have to see the 49ers and the Seahawks. Now, the Cardinals and Rams, 2 terrible teams that I think will be 2 terrible teams. That does help, but you still got to face probably the biggest NFC opponent in San Fran. Then you got to face a lot of good AFC teams. So off the jump, that is kind of tough. So the Jags and Titans, they have those common opponents, but you look at the handful of games that aren't common opponents, and the Jags just have way harder games than the Titans do, including the Chiefs. So I just think, the Titans, number one, Vrabel's a good coach. The culture there has been successful. They haven't always had all the pieces to get it done, but the culture has been make the playoffs, be a tough opponent. And so I do think that they'll be right there in that 9 to 10 wins. And if the Jags aren't able to overcome that hard schedule, I think the Titans will be the ones right there. So then AFC West is the Chiefs. There's no question about that. Obviously, unless all this is, of course, something happened. NFC North, I went with the Packers. The Vikings, like I said, not having Dalvin Cook, I really think is a bigger conversation than people are talking about. Especially when you just look at it as total yards and touchdowns and stuff. Well, number one, Madsen was a vulture on a lot of touchdowns. So Cook's numbers probably could have been better than what they are. But on top of that, it's the explosive plays. And I'm telling you, if you have 100 yards in a game, you probably had an explosive play. But let's just say you had 70 yards, pretty good running, but it's just a consistent 4 yards. That's not going to move the needle on the defense. But when you have 100 yards off three big plays, that is when the defense gets antsy and scared. And that allows you to play action effectively, which I think Justin Jefferson benefited greatly off of. Not saying that's all he did, but that was a big part of the Vikings game. And so, I don't think Matson is at all the same running back as Cook. Will they be able to have a run game effective enough to replace that? There's talks that they're moving less run and more pass. I got questions. The Packers, I'm good with everywhere except quarterback. That's a question mark. I don't dislike them, but that's a question mark. But you can't forget the talent this team has defensively. You can't forget the offensive line when healthy, really, really top tier. And then you add in Lucas Van Ness as a rookie. We'll get to see if he can help. Hopefully, it's Rashawn Gary's healthy. You really do have a lot of talent on that defense. So, I take it back. I don't know why I said the Packers. I took the Lions. I took the Lions to win this division like everybody else. But I do think the Packers are right there. And I think they'll be challenging for spot 2 if Jordan Love can be a top 15 quarterback. Is going to be tough. And I do think my Bears will be improved, but I wouldn't say contenders. But the Lions, they're the ones that are primed for the division, because not only people don't really realize how prolific that offense was last year. Like, across the board, they were top 5 in a lot of important categories. And we'll see what happens. Obviously, bringing in new running backs that people think should be better. And then Jameson Williams is suspended, but he will come back. And the defense should be improved. So we're going to see how that looks. And I think the needle's going up for them. And the NFC North in general has a lighter schedule. So I think the Lions will be okay. Obviously, they got to go against the Chiefs first. But I think the Lions will win that division. And then I think the Packers could threaten them. NFC East, I am going with the Eagles. But I'm almost 50-50 with Eagles and Dallas. They have brutal schedules. Both of them very talented, obviously. Probably trust Jalen Hurts a little bit more than Dak because he's a little more dynamic. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to say. I think both teams is loaded and they'll be battling out for that. But I'm going with Philly just because, again, what they were able to accomplish last year and bringing back players with that confidence and that culture. But the big question for the Eagles is how will they overcome losing both coordinators? And that's way more impactful than people think. And in general, the coaching is more impactful than people think. Continuity is very important. So that's the only thing that scares me about them. But I really could say coin toss between them and Dallas. The NFC South, I got the Saints. I don't think it's close. In the NFC West, I got the 49ers. Seahawks have a pretty lax schedule. So does the 49ers. So I think the Seahawks could maybe make a push. But if Purdy's healthy, I think the 49ers are able to take that division. So that's my division winners. Outside of that, every year when we, talk about playoffs, I don't necessarily predict who's going to be in the playoffs, especially not right now. But what I always talk about are contenders for the title. Legit contenders. And so these are teams that I think that have a realistic and a visible shot to make it to the Super Bowl. And I mean visible as in you can see the path, because there's going to be some teams that things happen unexpectedly, like maybe a Seattle last year where Geno unexpectedly played the way he did. Or you get a team where someone gets injured unexpectedly or someone doesn't perform. So there's going to be those, but these are teams that I think have a visible shot and a clear shot to getting in. So for me, the contenders, number one, the Chiefs. Pat Mahomes, enough said. If he's healthy, obviously the rest of the team getting Chris Jones. If Kelsey's healthy, all that's going to matter. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs, defending champs, they're a contender. The Bills, been contenders the last handful of years. I do think upgraded in some spots. Some spots they didn't upgrade as much as you wanted them to. But Josh Allen is a top five quarterback. And yeah, I mean, he's going to be dynamic enough to give the offense a chance in any situation, really. And the defense, for the most part, has been together. There's some changes, but they got talent there. They play tough, and they play disciplined, and that's probably the number one thing you need, especially in the secondary. The Bengals, Joe Burrow, like pretty much like the Chiefs. He's healthy. They're gonna roll, and the defense is very underrated in terms of how disciplined they are and how well they work together, even without having like some star-studded players. So the Bengals. The Jets with Aaron Rodgers has to be a contender. There's question marks again on how well it would gel or what challenges there might be. But you look at that defense, what they was able to do last year, and again, another year of continuity. You bring in a couple more pieces, and then that offense really held that team back. And you see the team winning despite that offense. You bring in Aaron Rodgers. That is night and day in terms of quarterback ability. And so when the one question mark, as I mentioned earlier, that probably would make them more of a bubble team is the O-line. Because Aaron Rodgers can mitigate some of that, but he can't mitigate all of that. No quarterback is immune to the bad pass protection. So if the offensive line isn't healthy, or if it really doesn't hold up the way people think, that will knock the Jets out. But I think they're enough to put them over the edge of bubble and into contenders, mainly because of that defense. The Eagles got them as a legitimate contenders. The Cowboys, the 49ers. The Seahawks I have as a legitimate contender. They've only gotten better on that roster. That roster has only gotten better. And whenever you have the offensive line, and that's going to be the number one thing. Not number one, sorry, but that's going to be a top five thing. And that's going to become more of a conversation, I guarantee you, in the next 3 years. There's going to be so much more conversation about offensive linemen. There's going to be so much more value placed on offensive linemen. As we see teams trying to do more, trying to protect QBs more, offensive line becomes huge. And if you look at what the Chiefs too, the Chiefs got two rookies and really changed that line around. But mostly if you look at what the Eagles were able to do with Jalen Hurts and that number one offensive line, I think a lot of people are looking at that and kind of rethinking kind of their approach. So if really the only thing it is for me with the Seahawks is, does Geno continue with his level of play, or does he decline? And that will be the question. But again, a very fair schedule. I think a defense that's gotten better and an offense that's added some pieces. I think Njigba is going to, when he's healthy, that's going to really change the dynamic of this receiving core more than people already think. And they were already prolific. So that's something I think people got to look out for. The Chargers, I got them as a contender. It's just way too much talent. Great quarterback. And I know Justin Herbert hasn't accomplished things and people think it's premature, but he's an absolute top five quarterback. And that defense has a lot of talent. That offense has a lot of talent. They just added another piece. The Chargers are 100% a contender. And the Dolphins, I put them, again, they were kind of on the bubble, but I put them as contender. Look, when those two, and I mean two, when Waddle and Hill are clicking, they completely change the dynamic for the offense, and it completely stresses a defense's, coverage. It does. I mean, it's not really even them doing anything as far as beating somebody one on one or making catches or whatever. It's really the fact that they're getting behind people, and that causes the zones to shift, opening up more. Either opening up something for the other receiver, for Waddle opening up Hill or Hill opening up Waddle, or it's opening up other stuff for the running backs and everybody else. So that type of speed, two people with that type of speed, you saw it last year. It completely clicks and it completely stresses out zones. And so Tua healthy, being able to deal out to them, that offense is going to keep them competitive. The defense, you bring in Ramsey, got hurt. Wilkins might be sitting out. We'll see. But the defense, I think, healthy can do enough. They can do enough to give you a possession or two, and the offense can do the rest. So, and I think that offense travels against any defense. Okay, those are my contenders. 10 teams, and on the bubble, I got the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens, for me, they're on the edge of a bubble team and a contender. The reason I don't put them as contender is because we have to see what this new offense looks like, and we're not even talking about the Lions and Stafford, where this is the third new offense, or Baker Mayfield is the third new offense in 3 years. No, Lamar has been in one system, and as much as people try to blame that system and also praised him for winning MVP, that's what the system he wanted in. And the system was created for him. They act like they forced him in there. That was created to make him successful. Can he be successful in a more modern system? That we have to see. The reason I still put them up there is because the defense is talented, not as good as, a little longer in the tooth than they were, but still talented. Still, that's a hardball team. They're going to be disciplined. But the reason I put them up here is because no matter what system Lamar's in, he's a dual threat right out the jump. In a very different way than anybody, maybe besides Justin Fields, is a dual threat. We're talking, chunk plays, explosive plays, game-breaking plays type of threat. So it doesn't matter if he's just scrambling or if it's a design run or whatever. When he moves, that shifts the defense, and he has to be accounted for. That is always going to make offense more dangerous. And then obviously the rest of the talent they have as a run team. But again, we got to see how it all comes together, especially with those receivers. The Steelers, there really is Kenny Pickett. Other than that, I mean, Mike Tomlin is really the reason they get the big boost. TJ Watt, one of the best defenders in the league. The defense is very strong, and if they're healthy, I think they'll be a top unit. But I give most of the bump because of Tomlin, and we're going to see what Pickett can do. But I do think just because, again, of the culture, and when I say culture, I don't mean in the cliche way sports media say it. Culture, to me, means the expectations in the building, how you practice, how you play, what the goals are, what you're aiming for. This isn't a team you're going to walk in and they're going to let everything slide. We're just happy to be here. No, it's a team that is expecting to compete. And so teams like that, I think, are always going to be there. Titans, almost the same story. Mike Vrabel, I talked about them earlier with the division. Strong defense and run game. That's always going to travel. That's always going to travel, and they're a very disciplined team, and they're used to winning, so I think they're on the bubble. They could be dangerous as well. Jaguars, I only put them on the bubble because of their schedule, and that defense hasn't fully gelled yet. It has a lot of promise, but we haven't yet see it become a top unit. But Trevor Lawrence, we believe, will ascend. But they're going to have a really tough schedule this year, so they're on the bubble for me. Broncos is completely dependent on Russ Wilson. The offensive line, they've added some upgrades. That was a really bad offensive line. So I can't say they're great, but they've upgraded. The defense is one of the top units. So when you have a top defensive unit, that already puts your team in position in most games. And so if Russ can hold up his end of the bargain, bring the offense along to that party a little bit, the Broncos will definitely be able to compete in any game. Obviously, they're in a tough division, but I think, again, if it clicks the way it's supposed to, I think they could be around. The Packers, talked about them earlier, had that discussion too. I just realized I once again left the Lions off. I didn't even have to say that. I could have just added them on later. But yeah, I talked about the Lions too. I think they're a bubble team. And then the Saints. Derek Carr, we'll see how he meshes with that new team. But the defense is a lot older, but they're veteran. They've been doing this for a long time. They got a culture of being a good unit. Good weapons on offense, especially when Kamara comes back. I do think Derek Carr is better than people give him credit for, and that offensive line is night and day compared to what he had in Las Vegas. So I do think if that passing game starts to click, that team could be dangerous. And obviously they're in the NFC South, so they darn near got a cakewalk into the division. So those are my bubble teams. Over half the league I have as a contender or bubble team. I do think we have a lot of good parity. And as we saw already, Travis Kelce going down, we'll see how bad that injury is, but it only takes 1 week to change a fortune for a team. So I do think there's a lot of people that are going to compete, but those are the teams that I believe walking into week 1 have what it takes on the roster, either on the coaching or the players or somewhere, to do to accomplish the job. And we'll see again some of these unexpected twists and turns, but I think that's the solid group right there. And so I'll leave it at that. Go down the comment section, let me know what you think, share it around, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.